Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Dr. James Richardson, who's here to share with us his Nautilus award-winning book, Our Worst Strengths, American Individualism and its Hidden Discontents. So have you ever wondered why it's so hard to make and keep close friends in modern America? And what does that really reveal about us? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Dr. James Richardson is a PhD cultural anthropologist who has studied American society for 20 years as a market research consultant. Recently, the author of a new award-winning nonfiction book, Our Worst Strength, American Individualism and its Hidden Discontents, questioning our approach to individualism as a way of life. Dr. Richardson lives in Tucson, Arizona, where he writes a weekly Substack, Homo Imaginari, for a growing international readership. So welcome to the show, Dr. James Richardson.
Thanks for having me, Marianne.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I'm an anthropologist, and I spent 3 years living in southern India in the late 1990s. And when I came home, I had a lot of culture shock, which is pretty normal for field workers. And I started engaging in this cultural comparison, essentially, professionally, but also just in my own head. And I realized how much harder it was to make friends as a young adult in the United States the way our society is set up. I also was about 30 years old, and I was single. I was finishing graduate school, and so I didn't have really I had not started my career. And so all of life's major social decisions had yet to be made. And that experience was entirely my own to manage. And the difference of how much responsibility we put on the individual's shoulders to manage, curate, and make all these decisions in there and curate the social world that they live in, it's just very, very different than when you live in a society where community and community pressure, including family pressure, is making most of those decisions for you. I decided to write the book once I had the time and the resources to do it. I've been thinking about this for years. So,
Well, I'm so glad that you wrote this book, and I think it's really so timely because, they talk about how we're in this kind of pandemic in a sense of people feeling lonely and not being able to connect. And that's so hard. I think most people would agree that that's really one of the toughest things here in America is being
Yep.
able to make friends and really connect with people.
Yes, I talk about it throughout my book. I settled on this word, which I hope is as non-judgmental as possible, but and that word is non-committal. And for good or for bad, our labor markets, our economy, our social structure, and our cultural values in urban America uh, encourage you not to overcommit to anything, except maybe a spouse and your kids. So you've got this very narrow locus of concern where you might really commit hard to relationships, but everything else we're encouraged to actually leave it all flexible. The more educated you are, Marianne, the more likely you're going to be pressured to do this because you need to be able to just pick up and go for some cool opportunity, right? And you may it's not about being forced to do it. You may want to do it. You may just want to pick up and go. So if you live in a culture in which geographically abandoning a social network is really, really not cool and not encouraged, you're going to pay a price for that, right? But we actually encourage people to remain fairly non-committal with their friends and their what sociologists call weak ties, so that you can just sort of dance around, chase jobs, chase opportunities, and pursue your own individual goals. I think sometimes, in your 20s, this is really exciting. I don't want to paper over that. It is. It's exciting because I talk about in my book, everything is upside in your early 20s. Like, you haven't made all the big life decisions, so they're all ahead of you. And you have so many choices and so many options. And I think what we're finding is that even with Gen Z, as they get out into the world, that um, they're more disconnected than even like our generation, Marianne. uh, and for a variety of near-term reasons having to do, as we know, with social media and the internet. But that loneliness is actually, it's ironic to me because we have a hard time committing to friendships. And the reason that we do is that we fundamentally have a problem with one aspect of healthy friendships, which is the obligation to help that other friend when they choose and when they ask. Now, this used to be pretty common behavior in the United States, and in the research for my book, talked with older baby boomers, and they had access to that world, to the dying remnants of it. And I'm talking about a world where, you need to fix something in your bathroom. You would literally go down the street and get somebody who was, good with plumbing, and you would team up for 2 weekends and renovate your bathroom yourself, right? That used to be totally normal behavior before World War II. That's the kind of thing that builds real friendships. It's the doing of things for each other. It's not what I talk about in the book, getting together over drinks and sharing sort of entertaining, almost competitive stories. That doesn't build a relationship. And I think that's really because we don't need friends for almost anything, really, including our income, and certainly not for home renovation. We have turned them into these sources of entertainment. And that is in the background in terms of creating a view of relationships in general as these non-committal sort of entertainment modes. Like, so friends become like TV shows. When you get bored with a show, you focus on another one. And because there's nothing really sticky, there's nothing forcing you to be in that relationship from a position of necessity. And this is the product of our affluence as a society. So the loneliness epidemic that's being talked about right now, it started decades ago because the fundamental relationships that glue neighborhoods together and communities together were based on exchanges of personal time and labor. And so without those exchanges, the relationships become pretty non-committal. And so you're left with your romantic or sexual partner as your primary committed relationship. So that, and younger kids are growing up watching their parents live like this too. Their parents have fewer friends. So they're thinking that's normal. And so it sort of repeats and to some extent gets a little worse with each passing generation. Now, I think what I talk about in the book is the solution, if we want to posit a solution, is that you have to consciously, friendship now becomes work. It becomes as much work as a project at work, if that makes sense.
It does. Yes.
Right. And so we have to be conscious about it. It's no longer going to be fed by, my bathroom needs remodeling. I'm not good, but Jack is down the street. That's not going to drive the friendships anymore. It's not going to drive the connections. And I just don't think we're ready for that because, we can do it, but we weren't raised to approach friendship like a project, and certainly not approach it like with the seriousness that we approach a marriage, right? But that's what it's going to take, because otherwise we're going to default to non-committal relationships, and they don't feed our souls. They entertain us, right? They could make us happy, but that's about it, briefly. And I think we're realizing, especially as people age, because they have fewer friends, that's been studied by sociologists, they realize that this model has some serious downside. And that if relationships sort of just fell into your lap structurally when you were younger, you don't know what to do when the world is asking you to go out and, literally make a friend. Quote unquote, make it. So just a more another example that ties into this is dating, right? There's a lot of young people, and this started, I think, with Generation X in the 90s. Um, it's easy to date and to make friends. And dating and friendship are two sides of the same coin. Because they're strangers that you become intimate with. Uh, Dating and friendship in a school setting, unless you have pronounced neurodivergence and other issues, it's relatively easy because there's a structure which collides you like atoms. It forces you to keep bumping into people. The dining hall at a college is a classic place where you just keep meeting the same people, right? That's a structural encouragement of relationship formation. It's wonderful. The problem is the minute you leave college, it's gone. There's no other institution, really, that you have to join as an adult where those collisions are going to happen. You don't have to do that. And so you don't. And it becomes this, what we have now is a cell phone, right? You curate a social world based on connections and likes and text messages and Discord chats. And, that may never lead to anything, Marianne. That's what I mean by you have to actually now work harder to create committed relationships because our society is not encouraging them. You don't need them. And so this becomes, as I say at one point in the book, it becomes a new 21st century obligation, which is that you need to be more mature at a very early age. Now, why do I say more mature? Well, because if you're letting the structure of social groups and communities and organizations, it could be church, your temple, if you were letting all that drive relationship formation, then you actually had never consciously worried about it. Now you have to. Right? So it's now a conscious obligation. It's another task that you have to take seriously. And that, I don't think we train people for that. We really don't. Do you? I mean,
I don't think we do at all. I look back in just growing up and you know who your friends are who would show up when it was time to move.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that way, if they couldn't really, those were your real friends, the people that would help you when you needed help. And it has me kind of thinking, I mean, I'd love for you to share with us your definition of American individualism. And I know we've kind of touched on this already.
So I define it as a way of life in which we culturally desire to maximize our individual autonomy in the areas of consumption. We want to buy products and services that appeal to us personally. And we also want the freedom in society, what you could call the civil rights, to go and pursue our dreams, passions, adventures without interference. And, I have this phrase that you could say it's my academic definition of what American individualism is, and it's the rights-enabled consumer, right? In the 1960s, America went through a civil rights torment, and part of that was to essentially extend constitutional rights that already existed for real and to give them federal enforcement power. And it's a wonderful thing that it happened, and we're still fighting that battle. But the thing that was going on at the same time that we basically still don't acknowledge is that one reason that you want all that civil freedom and autonomy is so that you can go pursue careers, buy things you want, make more money, right? Social mobility. And that's where the trap is laid for us. Because the more we get obsessed with our freedom and autonomy and what I want to do, Marianne, and what I want to buy, and it actually becomes a psychological prison. And some people take it to that extreme. A humorous way of looking at this, outside of your moving example, is the amount of effort it takes today in 2025 to get like 5 people to agree on where to go eat out.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
It's like what a needless source of stress. That's caused by hyper individualism. This belief that, well, I have an opinion and I think it should be Thai food. And it's amazing how otherwise mature adults just won't let it go. They just won't let one person decide for the group. We have to have an argument about
Well, it's interesting when we look at how this in real life is how you bring this up in the real life examples, how
it.
simple it sounds. But most of us never think about these kind of things. And so
Right.
how does this individualism encourage antisocial behavior at work?
Well, this is the very American thing. And any European if you've met a European who's come to live here, it's one of the first things they notice, and it drives them nuts, is that Americans see work as their number one identity. And I think to me, there's a tragic element to this because when I say that, it's actually more important than their marriages for a lot of people. If you do an interview and get it and sort of really poke and prod, it'll come out as the number one thing that matters to them is their career. And when you have a fixation on a social identity that's actually controlled by strangers, like your employer, you are highly insecure, Marianne. Like that's the baseline assumption you should make. So Americans are insecure at work. They're chasing their passion, their dream, maybe. But they've got this fundamental insecurity because they've placed their number one identity that they care the most about that also brings in their money so they can buy things is in the hands of strangers. And which is precisely why if you go to India, Marianne, you won't find people focused on their career as the number one thing. Because they focus on their family.
So
and their friends.
They identify if someone asks, like, what do you do or who are you? How do they identify then?
They start listing off their children, their brothers and sisters, where they grew up. Yeah. It's fascinating, right?
Wow.
I mean, you have to get deep into the chit chat at the party to find out what they do. It's not the first thing out of their mouth. So, and that's because it's not a priority. So India has a better alignment of sort of what they prioritize. Because why would you make the number one social identity something that a stranger controls everything about it? Your pay, your ability to get promoted. And so because we're very insecure at work, and I think we recognize that all the time. We do when something blows up. So how does this connect to antisocial behavior? Well, when people are insecure, they get afraid. And this is basic psychotherapy, right? And when you get afraid, that's when you contemplate and execute antisocial behavior because you're trying to defend yourself. And you're in an environment of strangers and weak ties at work. You may not know these people very well. You certainly don't in the beginning. And so the second thing that happens is that you as an individual, Marianne, you're responsible for your W-2 income as an employee. That's your job. There's no one at the company, including HR, who's sitting there going, he should earn a little more. He's just had a kid. Right? It's like, it's your job to get more money through the workplace. But they're strangers, right? So you don't fully trust them. And yet this responsibility has been placed on you to get the raise. The third thing that's going on is that not everyone can get promoted, Marianne. It's statistically not possible. There aren't enough senior positions. Right? So if you don't see a way to leave the company you're at for a variety of reasons, you're going to have another reason to become antisocial. And what I mean by antisocial is, be antisocial in a competitive nature at work so you can get the promotion. So we've created a labor market, a labor economy, and a culture which all combine to turn otherwise really good people into jerks at work. Because there's a lot of literature, jerks tend to get promoted because they're aggressive, and aggressive people often deliver outcomes that the employer wants. They also get the promotion. Right? The passive and meek and the non-assertive people, they're not going to get the promotion. So you start to see we have created a culture in which work's your number one identity, but you're actually going into some weird version of high school cum Lord of the Flies. And there really isn't anyone at work who has any legal obligation to be on your side. They don't really. I mean, they might care, but that's going to be a pretty much hit or miss based on the employer and the leadership style of the company. This is why young kids are so obsessed with leadership quality, because they watch their parents, Gen X and boomers, get treated like garbage by employers, left, right, and center. And they also watch them experience the loneliness of not getting promotions, fighting for them. So it's a very strange approach to work we've set up. And, I think you'd be shocked. I think people would be shocked how much a lot of that antisocial behavior would go away. And because it's driven by a desire to get promoted and get that salary up, would go away if you had something like universal basic income. Right?
Yeah, there's not that competitive
Right. There you go.
streak that it's like dog eat dog kind of thing in order to get that one promotion.
Yeah, or one or two. I mean, what I worked in a company for 15 years, Marianne, it didn't grow. Now I got promoted. I probably did some antisocial things. I wouldn't call myself a flaming jerk, but I had a family to feed. I was part of this whole system. I'm not just some academic observer. So I felt the temptation. It's very real, because the employer they're not looking out for you. And why? And so my Indian friends, my Tamil friends in South India will be like, "Oh, James, what are you, a moron? Why would you think they're going to work out? You're not even related to them." It's just like they're a bunch of strangers. What were you thinking?
Oh my
They don't
gosh.
come they don't come in with this delusion. So I did 3 years of field work there. I talked with hundreds of people, and of course their work came up, but very rarely their work came up in personal conversation. It was amazing how little it came up because they didn't care that much.
Well, that's so interesting to see the differences and what's important. But I think, your book really touches on many things as this great desire that people have to be connected and to feel connected. And what do you think readers will take away from your book in order to have a better sense of self?
I hope that they will take away that they have work to do, right? Like if this situation is to change, we all have to actually take on this new 21st century responsibility of rebuilding community, but also really working hard, turning off the television, turning off the smartphone to go and make relationships happen and do things for each other. Because if you just sacrifice time, that's what's going to create a friendship over a period of months and years. And unfortunately, we're in a world where you've got to actually intend to do all. The world's not structured to force you to do it. And that's the dark side of having a lot of autonomy. Is that it's not going to create those healthy relationships. You have got to go and sustain them. So hopefully people will realize that this is their job now, is to go make those connections happen and to work hard at them. Otherwise, it is not going to get solved. Like this, we can't just sit around and wait.
It doesn't get delivered to us. We actually have to put
No.
in the effort.
Yeah, and it's the irony of a highly convenience-oriented consumer culture we live in, right? Because we're so used to things being so easy. Oh, it's so much easier than my parents were kids, right? No, it's actually harder to maintain committed relationships in a world where people are trained to think about their personal preferences. It's really got to be conscious.
I have so many questions for you. I mean, your book is just so profound. I think it will help a lot of people kind of redefine what their life could be. So, Dr. Richardson, when it comes to social media, how is this making it more difficult for us to be connected?
I think that social media has greatly expanded the amount of weak ties that people have in their social world. And that's a term that I did not come up with. It's an old sociological term. It has to do with the outer rung of relationships that in which you don't necessarily do a lot for these people, but you might know them at work, you met them at a conference, maybe you met them randomly on a vacation, and got their Facebook connection. And we now have an internet-enabled social world, which is chock full of those weak ties. We have a very shallow understanding of these people. It's usually one specific kind of, either one occasion or one aspect of their life that we might understand. I use the metaphor of the sliver, right? We have these weak ties, and we have a sliver of their life that we perceive, maybe work, maybe where they live, but we don't have a well-rounded understanding that creates a real relationship. And it's real because you know so much about them that you understand the context of when they do things. You understand the context in which they say things, when they make jokes. So social media, to the extent that it sucks people in and they think that this is their primary social world, they're interacting disproportionately with people that they just don't know much about. And the way that the platforms are managed, it's encouraging people to interact in a highly public manner with comments and posts. And you know, this is like an extreme version. This is an extreme version of it, sort of throwing yourself to the mob of strangers who know nothing about you and have no accountability. So the problem with social media is it basically goads us to spend too much time in low accountability relationships where we don't know the other person very well. We might only know them based on comments, which is kind of ridiculous. I use a humorous anecdote in my book about, when, in the 19th century on the family farm, where you basically spent all day working with your relatives. Right? I mean, probably didn't even have paid labor outside the harvest season. So everybody was a relative. Everybody knew each other perhaps too well by today's standards. So when, 19-year-old Jack is driving the tractor and has a tantrum because something's not working and starts screaming and losing it, basically, and this happens to all of us, right? We know Jack. And so that tantrum gets filtered in, it gets understood in the context of our deep knowledge of that individual, and so we don't overreact to that. If a new employee comes to work and the computer doesn't work and they have a similar tantrum, so tractor, computer, same emotional, same frustration, HR is involved, people are scared, oh my God, I'm triggered. And the only reason for any of that fear is because we just don't know the person. That's it. That's the explanation. We actually don't have any sense that person, we have no proof that person is dangerous any more than my brother Jack, who's having a tantrum on the tractor. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you for taking the time to explain that. And it brings everything together. It just how important connections are, and while our individualism has really there's some benefits to it, there's also some negatives to it as well.
Well, this is part of the maturity thing that I sort of realized as the author, was that if we're going to have all these weak ties, and a lot of them, this is asking us to be really wise in terms of how we react to one-off comments, behaviors. Because we have to be wise enough to understand, well, I don't even know this person, so let's not jump to conclusions, right? Let's not make assumptions. Now, that's easy to write and say. It's very hard to be that mature and wise. But that's what's being asked of us in the way we structure society. When you throw in cultural diversity, then it's asking for even more wisdom and maturity. Just hold on. Don't jump to conclusions. You could jump to conclusions quickly, Marianne, on the old family farm because you knew Jack. You knew exactly, right? You knew exactly what that tantrum was about. You see, I mean, so that's why those bad habits, that's where they come from. And if you like when I was living in southern India, that was the other thing that I found so fascinating is because people knew each other better, they would be all over each other with criticism. And yeah, don't say that. Hey, you can't say that. No, 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 don't do that. And the reason they felt empowered to do that is because of the depth of the relationship. Right? Makes it easy to confront and control other people's antisocial behavior, right? Because you know exactly the context where it's coming from. We tend to react really poorly in the way society's set up. We overreact. We don't acknowledge that we don't even know these people. We bureaucratize the reaction, which is really messed up. You know, if someone does something weird at work and they get dragged into HR, that's terrifying. It has to be.
Yes.
You know, it's just not that, because you're now putting someone's salary on the line. And this could be literally a personal emotional meltdown, which is a normal human thing. So
Well, Dr. Richardson, I felt your book, Our Worst Strength, was such a profound read. Where can our listeners go to connect with you and learn more about your work?
Well, they can read more essays in a similar vein on my Substack, Homo Imaginari. You can find that on Substack.com. And if they want to check out the book, it's in multiple formats on Amazon.
Well, Dr. Richardson, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
And thank you, Marianne, for having me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Richardson. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your Nautilus award-winning book, Our Worst Strength: American Individualism and Its Hidden Discontents. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.